Something big just blocked out the sun today and no one even seemed to notice it. Scott C. Waring found these images on a SDO NASA site that observes the sun through different filters, and he put them together so you can see them in real time as it happened. The reason nobody noticed is that it wasn't visible on Earth, but was actually only visible from the location of the SOHO NASA satellite. So, the real question he have is, did a UFO pass between the satellite and the sun causing this? Whatever it was huge. He have reported Earth-size UFOs near the sun a lot over the last month, found in SOHO sun images, so it really has he concerned? What is NASA not telling us? Why didn't they talk about this with the public? This is crazy important astronomy news and yet nothing from NASA? If they don't want to talk about it, you can bet that it's something that would frighten the public. This may be astronomy history being made, the first ever eclipse recorded off-world.
All right, let's listen to number 10. So, this is a big deal. I mean, it's good that Bernie goes on the show. This is one of the biggest shows that are out there of people who are, I mean, just broadly speaking, it's one of the biggest, podcast online shows that exist. I mean, I don't know, the specific numbers, but they're very close. Consistently on the top of the podcast charts. And on YouTube, it's huge. And it's good news. It means that Bernie's out there looking for votes where he can find it. He also, of all of the shows that he could have gone on to reach these people, this is the best of those, I think. And certainly Joe Rogan on the in the wake of talking to Cornel West, I think is like at the very least, exposing his listeners and viewers to a whole new set of assumptions and ideas.
This is not addressed. When we talk about making America great, wouldn't fixing the worst parts of the country be the primary concern? The less people that grow up in a terribly disadvantageous position from birth. Wouldn't that be an important thing? And what can you do to resolve that?
Well, Joe, I think you said it better than I can. I think you're right. When we talk about what it means to live in a great society, a great nation, a nation that we're proud of, I'm afraid there are some people who have incredible wealth and power who say, what's great is that we're seeing a growth in the number of billionaires in America. Isn't that terrific? And we got one guy who's worth $155 billion. How great. Oh, by the way, we're building more nuclear weapons. And we're spending $750 billion a year on the military. Isn't that extraordinary? And by the way, do you see the yacht that billionaire has? It's 3 miles long. Isn't that great? Your point is that we have to, I think, as I understand what you're saying, we have to redefine what being a great nation is about. We are not a great nation when we have 40 million people living in poverty and in despair. We're not a great nation when we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality, when 87 million people can't afford to go to a doctor today. So to answer your question, I think that as a nation, we have got to focus a great deal of attention on those distressed communities. Often they're African American, often they're Latino, often they are rural white communities. And that means making sure that the kids there get the quality education that they deserve, making sure that we're creating good paying jobs in those communities. I voted against NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and other trade agreements because I knew that those agreements were written by corporate America with the goal of shutting down plants in this country and moving abroad. And the result of that has been the loss of millions of good paying jobs and the complete destruction of communities all across this country, in the South and all across this country.
What's fascinating to me is that, and I don't get a sense of where Rogan is on this, to how much, and I'm using Rogan only as a surrogate for some cohort of his audience. Sure, there's a bunch of his audience that don't care. I'm sure there's a bunch of his audience that sit and refute what Bernie says, but there's a bunch of his audience that I think are probably, like Joe, probably wondering, wait a second, how does the idea of measuring the greatness of the country as a function of how well it does for the most amount of people possible versus how well it does, how far into the stratosphere we can send specific individuals, right? Like in the context of healthcare, like, do we have a great healthcare system if princes from foreign countries come here to get a liver transplant or whatever it is, some type of procedure they can't get anywhere else? Or do we have a great healthcare system because the entire population has better health, better outcomes, et cetera, et cetera? Now, these notions, I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, but in the context of our system, they seem to be. Because when you incentivize providing super uber care for the wealthiest